Writing your own story, the power of self definition in a world that tries to define you. Have you ever walked into a room and immediately felt the weight of assumption settling on your shoulders? That moment when you realize people have already decided who you are before you've said a single word. When your credentials are questioned despite being impeccable, when your voice is dismissed despite speaking truth, when your very presence seems to require constant justification. I recently had the extraordinary privilege of interviewing Angelita Riviere, whose groundbreaking work on identity and professional empowerment has transformed how we think about self definition in spaces that weren't designed for us. What struck me most about our conversation wasn't just her brilliant mind, though, make no mistake, her intellect is formidable, but how she's dedicated her life to ensuring Black women can write their own stories in a world eagerly waiting to write those stories for them. Angelita has spent 20 years documenting the invisible barriers that shape professional landscapes, creating frameworks that have helped thousands reclaim their narratives in hostile environments. Her research doesn't just identify problems, it creates pathways through them. And she does it all with a clarity and compassion that makes the impossible suddenly feel within reach. The most revolutionary thing you can do, Angelita told me, leaning forward with an intensity that made the air between us electric, is refuse the narrative someone else has assigned to you. Think about that for a moment. What narratives have been assigned to you? And more importantly, which ones have you accepted without question? The statistics paint a sobering picture. In 2025, despite record numbers of women leading Fortune 500 companies, only two of those CEOs are Black women. Two out of 500. Let that sink in. If representation were proportional to population, that number would be closer to 65, not 265, but numbers only tell part of the story. Behind each statistic is a human being fighting to be seen for who they truly are, not who others assume them to be. Consider Thasunda Brown Duckett, who became CEO of TIA in 2021 and remains one of only two Black women CEOs on the Fortune 500 list. Her journey wasn't just about breaking glass ceilings, it was about refusing to let others define her capabilities or potential. Duckett started from humble beginnings, working her way through the executive ranks at JP Morgan Chase and Company before making history at TIA. What's remarkable isn't just that she reached the pinnacle of corporate America, but how she did it by consistently delivering exceptional results while unapologetically embracing her identity as a Black woman leader. She didn't wait for permission to be exceptional. She didn't ask for validation of her leadership style. She simply delivered results while embracing her full identity. No code switching, no dimming her light, no apologizing for taking up space. I'm not the exception, she once said at a conference I attended, her voice carrying to every corner of the room. I am what's possible when talent meets opportunity. The audience erupted in applause, but I couldn't help wondering how many talented people never get that opportunity because someone else has already written their story for them. But here's where things get complicated. For every Thasunda Duckett, countless others face barriers that seem designed specifically to keep them from writing their own stories. In April 2025 alone, Black women lost 106,000 jobs, the steepest decline among all demographic groups. That's not a coincidence. That's a system working exactly as it was designed to work. I remember sitting with Angelita as she explained this phenomenon. The first people pushed off the boat when it starts rocking, she said, her eyes reflecting both resignation and determination, are always the ones who were the last allowed to board. The corporate rollbacks of DEI initiatives we've witnessed since 2023 tell this story clearly. At Meta, formerly Facebook, Black employees watched as opportunities vanished overnight. Programs designed to create pathways to leadership were dismantled. Representation dwindled as layoffs disproportionately affected those hired during previous diversity pushes. One former Meta employee told Angelita, Monday I was part of the future of tech, Tuesday I was a diversity hire, Wednesday I was unemployed. This is what happens when we allow others to define us, when we accept external validation as the measure of our worth. The rules change, the goalposts move, and suddenly the story being told about us bears no resemblance to the truth we know. After pledging bold change following the George Floyd protests in 2020, many corporations, including Meta, quietly scaled back their promises just 5 years later under new scrutiny and legal threats. The corporate commitment to inclusion proved as substantial as morning fog, impressive at dawn, gone by midday. But here's what's fascinating and what Angelita emphasized repeatedly during our conversation. Those same employees who found themselves suddenly without institutional support didn't disappear. They formed networks outside the company. They created their own opportunities. They refused to let a corporate decision define their professional identity or worth. They wrote new stories. And that's the power Angelita Riviere has been teaching us about all along, the power of self definition. When we look at wage disparities, the story becomes even clearer. Full time working Black women earn just 69 cents for every dollar paid to white men nationally. In Louisiana, that drops to 49 cents. Imagine doing the same work with the same credentials and being told your labor is worth half of someone else's. These aren't just numbers, they're stories being written about worth, about value, about who deserves what in our society. Generations have watched higher participation fail to translate into economic security, but recent years have seen more voices refusing silent acceptance or assimilation into prescribed roles. But what happens when we reject those stories? What happens when we say, no, that's not who I am? That's not what I'm worth. That's not the story I'm living. Something powerful emerges. As the great Audre Lorde reminded us, if I didn't define myself for myself, I would be crunched into other people's fantasies for me and eaten alive. Her words ring even truer today than when she first spoke them. Defining yourself isn't just about personal empowerment, though that's certainly part of it. It's about survival in spaces that weren't built with you in mind. It's about thriving despite systems designed to limit your potential. I asked Angelita what she would say to a young Black woman just starting her career, facing these realities for the first time. Her answer was simple but profound. Remember that your job title is not your identity. Your salary is not your value. Your colleague's perception is not your reality. She continued, the moment you allow someone else to define who you are is the moment you surrender your power. This isn't about positive thinking or manifestation. This is about the hard, practical work of claiming your narrative in spaces designed to assign you one. It's about walking into rooms where no one looks like you and refusing to shrink. It's about correcting assumptions without apologizing for the discomfort it causes. It's about recognizing that representation matters precisely because it challenges the stories institutions tell about who belongs where. But let's be honest, this work is exhausting. The constant vigilance required to maintain your sense of self in environments that question your very presence takes a toll. I remember Angelita sharing a moment from her own career. I was so tired of being the only one in the room that I started bringing a cardboard cutout of another Black woman to meetings. She laughed, a sound both warm and sharp edged. My colleagues were confused, but it made a point. Why was I always the only one? And why was that somehow my burden to carry? Her humor masks a painful truth. The emotional labor of being the only one is rarely acknowledged or compensated. This is why community becomes so crucial. When DEI initiatives at companies like Meta were rolled back, affected employees didn't face that setback alone. They created support networks. They shared opportunities. They reminded each other of their worth when systems failed to do so. As Angelita put it, sometimes you need someone else to hold your story when you're too tired to carry it yourself. But community support alone isn't enough. We need structural change. We need transparency in hiring and promotion practices. We need accountability when companies fail to address wage disparities. We need recognition that diversity isn't a favor being done for underrepresented groups. It's a business imperative that benefits everyone. Until those changes come, however, we have the power of self definition. We have the ability to reject narratives that don't serve us and create ones that do. This isn't about denial or delusion. It's about clarity. It's about saying, I see the story you're trying to write about me and I reject it. Here's who I actually am. The Sunda Duckett didn't become CEO of Thai A by accepting limitations placed on her. She defined herself as a leader capable of exceptional results, and then she delivered those results consistently. The Meta employees who found themselves suddenly without institutional support didn't disappear into statistics. They defined themselves as valuable professionals whose worth transcended any single company's policies. The advocates fighting wage disparities don't accept the narrative that Black women's labor is worth less. They define the issue as one of justice, not charity, and push for systemic change accordingly. In each case, the power comes from refusing external definitions and creating internal ones. So, what does this mean for you? How do you begin the work of defining yourself when so many forces are trying to define you instead? Angelita suggests starting with three questions. First, what stories have been told about you that you've accepted without question? Second, what parts of your identity have you minimized to fit into spaces not designed for you? And third, if you could define yourself without fear or external pressure, who would you say you are? These aren't easy questions. They require honesty, vulnerability, and courage. But they're the beginning of reclaiming your narrative. From there, the work becomes practical. Challenge assumptions directly, correct misconceptions without apology, celebrate your achievements publicly, build networks that affirm your value, mentor others facing similar challenges, advocate for structural changes that recognize everyone's full humanity. As Angelita reminded me, your story doesn't have to be perfect, it just has to be yours. Today, I challenge you, not tomorrow, not next week, but today, to identify three qualities that define your professional image, qualities no one else gets to assign except you. Write them down, share them with your network, make them part of how others see you. Because the revolution begins with a simple act: refusing the narrative someone else has written for you and picking up the pen yourself. The world will try to tell you who you are. It will assign you roles, expectations, and limitations based on assumptions rather than reality. It will offer you stories about yourself that serve everyone's interests but your own. And in that moment, you have a choice. You can accept the story being told about you, or you can write your own. Choose to write your own, not just for yourself, but for everyone whose story has been written by someone else's hand. Because when you define yourself, when you insist on the fullness of your humanity in spaces designed to flatten it, You don't just change your story, you change what stories are possible.